Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. Budget day in Zimbabwe, scuffles in parliament as fuel prices go up, salaries are slashed and white farmers get compensation.
Ordinary Zimbabweans are hoping for a budget, at least that will set them on a path of economic prosperity.
We speak to members of South Africa's coloured community to investigate the reasons behind recent violent protests in their neighbourhoods. Also on the programme, making waves with catchy beats. Niniola writes her songs in English and Yoruba to keep the mystery in her music.
I can hide, you have to decode everything that I'm saying. So it's part of the mystery and the love for my music.
And in sports, both Nigeria and South Africa win big at the Women's Africa Cup of Nations in Ghana. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. We start in Zimbabwe, where people are assessing what the first budget of Emerson Mnangagwa's presidency will mean for them. Dozens of measures were announced at the state parliament this afternoon, but here are some of the most eye-catching ideas. Over $50 million has been set aside to compensate former white farm owners who were forcefully removed from their land under Robert Mugabe. Finance Minister Mthuli Ncube also announced a 5% cut in salaries for senior civil servants. And there's a raft of tax increases, including on fuel, which goes up by an extra 7 cents as of the 1st of December. The BBC's Shingai Nyoka has been following developments from Harare and sent us this update.
Finance Minister and international economist Mthuli Ncube is optimistic about Zimbabwe's economic future, but not everybody shares his optimism here. Today, here in Parliament, he presented his maiden budget. But before he did that, there were skirmishes, unprecedented levels of skirmishes that broke out between members of the opposition, the Movement for Democratic Change Alliance, and the security. The Speaker of Parliament accused the opposition of not respecting President Emerson Mnangagwa as he entered the chambers. They refused to stand up, and for that, some of them were dragged out of Parliament before the rest of the members walked out in mass. It just shows the hurdles that this government has to overcome in bridging the divides between the opposition and the ruling party so that this country can move forward. Ordinary Zimbabweans are hoping for a budget, at least that will set them on a path of economic prosperity. This government has been beset by high spending, by high levels of debt, and we've seen that in the increase in the price of food as well as in the fuel queues that have been caused by a shortage of foreign currency. Minister Ncube has called this an austerity for prosperity budget, and he's also proposed 5% cuts for senior government officials, including the president, his vices, as well as senior members of state-owned and state-run companies. The opposition has said that this budget doesn't go far enough and that mammoth political reforms are needed, not just economic reforms. It just shows the huge task that lies ahead for this government, trying to undo 20 years of economic decline. So the finance minister will not just have to balance a budget and balance his figures, but he'll also have to balance the expectations of a restless country. Shingai Nyoka, BBC News, Harare.
Well, let's get more on the story now. And joining us from Harare is financial analyst Michelina Chindea. She's in the capital, Harare. Michelina, so the government is calling this an austerity budget. Will it be welcomed by all?
Well, he has really taken on stringent cost-cutting measures, which needed to be done. And they might not be pleasing to everybody, but they are necessary in order for us to move in the right direction. Especially, for example, the 5% cut on government salaries, starting from managerial positions to the position of ministers. It may be upsetting to some, but it's what we need to do because our fiscal debt had been prolonged and was uncontrollable, and was the reason why the economy was on a downward spiral.
And this $53 million that has been set aside as compensation for white farmers who lost their land under the previous administration of Robert Mugabe. I mean, first of all, will this money be enough? And for a cash-strapped country like Zimbabwe, where is it coming from?
$53 million is a small amount of money, but it is a good start. It's a good start because it shows government's commitment to resolving the land reform issue, which has not been addressed for quite some time. And we have such a huge fiscal debt of $9 billion, plus or minus, which needs to be cleared. Therefore, failing to resolve the land issue will not allow Zimbabwe to meaningfully engage with international financial institutions and the donor community, because the country desperately needs new lines of credit and financing to kickstart a struggling economy. I do agree that $53 million is a small amount compared to the acreage or hectare of land that was taken and the damage that was caused, but it is a good start because it shows that we are in the right direction and have the right mindset.
And we saw those scuffles in Parliament even before the budget was read. I mean, it was members of the opposition, MDC, that were protesting. Does this mean they don't agree with the budget?
I think that people do agree with the budget, because if you had listened to Professor Ncube as he read the budget, people were applauding some of the measures that he was taking because they were long overdue. I think economics and politics are hard to separate in Zimbabwe. They're very intertwined. So obviously, if people do have political issues, that will then also come into our economic issues. But I don't think it's indicative of them being unhappy with the budget. It's just tensions, obviously, between certain people or party members. And
let me just squeeze this question in, Michelina, very briefly. Is Mthuli Ncube the right man to move Zimbabwe forward economically? He only took over office in September.
He could be considered an outsider, but in my opinion, I think he is perfect for the job because he shows that he's experienced, he's committed, and he's bold. He's been bold enough to take austerity measures, for example, the 5% salary cuts. He has the experience. He's worked for the World Bank and abroad. And I think he's very committed. He shows that he has the energy and he's got the people in mind.
Okay, Michelina Chindea, thank you very much. Speaking to us there live from Harare.
Thank you for having me.
Now, a new report has revealed evidence of sexual harassment, bullying and intimidation within the African Union Commission, which is based in Addis Ababa. It also revealed gender discrimination, fraud, corruption and human resource malpractice. It says some senior staff are well positioned to exploit young women, particularly short-term staff, youth volunteers and interns. The report, which was ordered following information in an anonymous letter to officials, also promises a new zero-tolerance approach and new procedures. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa. Officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo have repatriated over 300 former Rwandan Hutu rebels and their families, including 62 former combatants. They were at the Kanyabayonga transit camp in North Kivu province, which is now closed. A former judge and leading opposition figure has been sworn in as the head of Ethiopia's electoral board. Birtukan Mideka is the latest significant appointment of a woman to a key position in public office by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. She was amongst dozens of opposition leaders jailed after the disputed elections of 2005 that led to the deaths of hundreds of people. A South African court has upheld a traditional community's right to refuse to allow mining on their tribal land. Villagers have been fighting the state and a mining company for a decade to block the mining of titanium on their land in the province of Eastern Cape. The ruling could have wider implications for other traditional communities. And Ghana's National Communications Authority has fined all 4 mobile network operators a total of $7 million. The NCA says Airtel, Tigo, Glo, MTN and Vodafone are not complying with their quality of service requirements, including coverage, data, voice and speech quality. It follows spot checks across the country during the first 3 months of the year. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come, Mimi with all the sports, as Chelsea and African football legend DJ Drogba confirms he's finally hanging up his boots. I'm Peter Okocha. The top story this hour. In Zimbabwe's first budget since the departure of Robert Mugabe, $53 million has been earmarked to compensate former white farm owners who were removed from their land under a controversial program set by the former president. Now, South Africa's coloured community, that's people of mixed heritage, were alienated during the country's apartheid regime. Some now feel that the current democracy also marginalises them. They believe that they aren't black enough, and there have been recent violent protests across South Africa. The BBC's Valdi Carlese went to find out what's at the heart of the anger.
When you smoke this, they put on a safety belt.
Drugs, gangs, unemployment, and poverty. These are the things Westbury, a coloured community in Johannesburg, is known for. 23-year-old Luther Noble has lived here for most of his life. He's among the millions of young South Africans unable to find work. The country has one of the highest youth unemployment rates in the world. 24 years on from the end of apartheid, many like Luther feel locked out of the jobs market. They feel they're not black enough and not white enough.
Do you feel judged by what skin color you are?
Well, I went in 2015 for a job. They said I should come back. The second big manager didn't even look my way because I was a colored. He told the big manager that he's not taking people.
So you've been through you're not black enough, you're not white enough.
It was discouraging. I gave up for a year to look for work.
And while this frustration isn't unique to the youth of Westbury, it all too often leads to crime. According to police, there have been 33 gang-related deaths here in the past year.
They shoot people. One was here, one was in our street, up in that street there, mostly in between houses.
Westbury recently erupted in violent protests following the shooting of a woman and a 10-year-old girl, caught in the crossfire between rival gangs.
The lady was laying there, my tears were falling.
Mother of two, Carol Sullies, led the protests. She didn't plan to, but her frustration boiled over.
What do you think is at the source of this?
You know, let me start with unemployment. Like for instance, here in Westbury, our people, unemployment, yeah, I will say education is also part of it. But most of our youngsters, they finish matric, then they don't have anything to do. They will stand on corners because someone that are selling drugs will say, no man, I can pay you 1,000 rand a week. And I mean, if you don't get anything, you finish with school, what are you gonna do? You're gonna take 1,000 rand.
Heavily armed police have been deployed here to take on the drugs and the gangs. For the ordinary people caught in the middle, there are two choices: accept it and suffer, or fight to get out. Luther is seeking his escape through the boxing ring.
Hopes for the future is like me boxing overseas, being the world champion of the whole world. That's my plan.
Valdi Carlese, BBC News, Westbury, Johannesburg.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi, what have you got for us today?
Women's Africa Cup of Nations and DJ Drogba. It was a big win for Nigeria in the Women's Africa Cup of Nations on Wednesday with a 4-0 win over Zambia. That victory kept the defending champions' title hopes alive. Francisca Ordega, who scored one of those goals, was nominated Most Valuable Player in the match. She spoke about their fighting spirit as they face Equatorial Guinea in their last group game.
Sure. It is, but this is not just the end. This is the beginning. We're a team that never gave up, no matter what. We fight to the end. The last game wasn't the best performance for us, but I promise from today, from this victory, we're gonna go all out to get our bet right back. We're here for business. We're not here for anything. This is why we're here. So this is the beginning, and this is not for us. It's gone. It's gone. The performance of today, the match, the win, and everything is gone. We're looking forward for the next game.
Another big result in the Women's Africa Cup of Nations was that of South Africa on Wednesday, of course. They thrashed former winners Equatorial Guinea 7-1. They will now face Zambia. The result from both the Nigeria and South Africa matches means that Group B will be decided by the final games on Saturday.
Without any pressure, we're taking one game at a time. This is our second game of the tournament. We still have one more group stage match against Zambia, and we will be focusing on it from here. We're happy that we won, but we have to forget about the result because we have a very tough match coming up. And yeah, we'll take one game at a time until we get our mission, which is to qualify for the World Cup.
Earlier this month, it had been expected that former Ivory Coast and Chelsea football legend Didier Drogba was going to retire. But he then hinted that he might play on a little longer, leaving many to wonder if he had a change of heart. Well, now the 40-year-old has confirmed that his retirement ending an amazing 20 years in the game. He's been remembering one of his favorite memories with Chelsea.
The more I was scoring goals, the more the support was coming, and really, like, we've been chasing this Champions League for, what, 8 years together, and to win it the way we did, to suffer the way we suffered during the final, I think there's nothing more than this kind of relationship, you know, that I share with the Chelsea fans.
Remember that Champions League win, of course. Now, all this week, we've been bringing you the profiles from the 5 players that have made the shortlist for this year's 2018 BBC African Footballer of the Year. Today, we take a look at Ghana and Atletico Madrid's Thomas Partey.
Scoring goals allow yourself to be seen in the world, because now football is all about goals. Anytime you score, you feel confident and you have more confidence to keep playing more. It was a great season because we were second in the league and we won the Europa Cup, then we won against Madrid in the Super Cup. Yeah, I feel great, you know. I think it's a dream come true because it's not easy for a guy like me to come from a background that we have nothing to be at this level.
Thomas Partey was once like us, and then he also started here, and then what I could remember about him was his long passes is one of the best. Yeah.
I love his confidence on the ball. You know, he doesn't rush, he doesn't panic on the ball, and I want to be like him.
I started in a small village where my father was like the team manager. He did a lot of sacrifices that he never told me about that. It was him selling his stuff to try to get me that new boot. From that age, I was looking up to like Michael Essien, and every upcoming footballer look up to him, and I try to be like a stopper, using the intelligence of Michael Essien, and also attacking, I use the strength of Yaya Toure. We all know he's a great coach and one of the best coaches in the planet, and also he helped me to like adapt to any position that he put me, because it's not easy for any player to play a lot of positions. So for me, he's doing well in my life, and I think he deserves a lot of respect. I'm Thomas Partey, a player of Atletico Madrid and the Ghana national team. Please vote for me for BBC African Footballer of the Year.
And that's all the sport. Peter.
What's your favorite DJ Drogba memory?
That Champions League win. But another one was when my mom's a huge football fan and watches in Nigeria a lot of matches. And we met Didier Drogba in the Ivory Coast, and he gave her a big hug, and she was blushing and all shy. I'm like, oh, my mom lost for words. Never happens.
I mean, I don't have very good memories of him. He always scored against Arsenal, you know. So
your favorite team, of course.
Many thanks, Mimi. Now, Niniola Akpata, better known by her stage name Niniola, is a Nigerian singer and songwriter. She rose to recognition in 2013 after finishing third runner-up in the 6th season of Project Fame West Africa. The award-winning singer went on to achieve international fame with her song Mardonna. She's known for her mix of English and Yoruba in her music. She stopped by our studio to perform her hit tracks.
Don't babble she telescope me, don't go on don't you there before, don't blame me, Tony. Don't power you come to me, baby.
Music has been part of my life since I was a child, because my parents didn't really used to take me out. So I found solace in, their records like Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, Celine Dion, Whitney Houston, African music, and then I started to mimic the voices that I heard. Unknown to me, I was training my voice. And from there to high school, I used to entertain my friends during lunchtime. I was sort of like a human radio. They brought their requests and I sang to them. When I decided to go into music full-time, I told myself that I wasn't going to look at it gender-based. I was just going to look at, music as, an art. My first single was a hit song in the country, and, that really gave me the confidence to continue, and that's why I even chose that genre of music, because I did it first, it worked, and I decided to stick with it. I sing in 2 languages for now. That's Yoruba and English language. Yoruba, that's my language. It's a very interesting language. The melodies that I get from singing in my language is exceptional. And because I can hide, you have to denote, decode everything that I'm saying. So it's part of the mystery and the love for my music. I remember when I dropped Maradona last year, it was an instant hit. And I moved on to the second song. I was pushing Sika, and South Africa, got wound of that song, and they were loving the song. I tried to ignore them, but videos were coming in of people dancing on the street, in the clubs, in the bathrooms, and all of that. And even Maradona became the #1 song in South Africa, and that's what took me there. And now it's spreading to other countries, Kenya and the rest of I don't even want to talk too much, because something is happening, so.
Only can lata, only malata, only can dojo me. Olo malapa, only can lata, only malata, only can dojo me. Olo makapa, oh Maradona, oh Maradona, to Maradona me, oh Maradona, oh Maradona, to Maradona me.
Niniola or Niniola. Just before we go, another look at our top stories. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has overseen his first budget since becoming the country's new leader. A raft of measures were announced, including more than $50 million being set aside to compensate former white farm owners who were forcefully removed from their land under Robert Mugabe. There'll also be tax increases to fuel and cuts to salaries of senior civil servants. That's it on Focus on Africa for today. From me, Peter Okwoche, and the rest of the team, I want to say thank you very much for watching.